Yesterday, Amsterdam voted. Today, the new coalition negotiations started to make the agenda for 4 new years. For some people, things will not change much. For people like me, who demand real system change, it feels like we have to take action. We need new horizons and narratives. Let us take a moment to dream in the next hour. Thank you for being here with me. My name is Marian Grace, and I am here sitting as a member of Amsterdam City Rights. As an undocumented woman, living in this city is already 7 years. I was not allowed to vote yesterday. Estimates are there are 30,000 people like me who live in the city without the official right to work, to study, to rent a house, and to vote. But we do work, and we do contribute to society. We clean your houses and take care of your children. We survive in the margins of this society. In 1998, the Linkage Act, or Koppelingswet, was implemented in the Netherlands. From this moment on, only people who have a BSN number are given access to social rights, benefits, and services of the government. Extreme exclusion was the result for those who cannot obtain this BSN number, like the undocumented people living in this country. These 9 numbers are the access. These 9 numbers exclude you from me. All undocumented people without a BSN are never registered anymore as citizens of this city. This Linkage Act causes human rights violation on a bigger scale. Over 1 billion people worldwide are unable to prove their identity. As such, they are without the protection of law and are unable to access basic services, participate as a citizen or a voter, have a bank account, and make digital transactions or work. Those who live without an ID are likely to face barriers, delays, and other dehumanizing forms of detention or deportation. With limited freedom of movement, our communities find themselves at great risk and with little support. In the pandemic, it became clear that we had no possibility to get a QR code as proof of our vaccinations, and we are excluded even more. As elsewhere in the world and in Europe, it is more easy to get work permits and temporary permits. In the Netherlands, it is almost impossible. In fact, it is impossible. The immigration service of the government is excluding national policy, which is becoming more and more xenophobic and is set to keep people out. Cities have to deal with the consequences and effects of these excluding policies. How do you govern a city if over 30,000 people are living anonymous lives, are living almost rightless position? In 2025, Amsterdam will have existed for 750 years. This will be a year of celebration. Amsterdam has always been a city of migration. It is up to us to make sure that when we celebrate this milestone, everyone who is in Amsterdam gets access to city citizenship. Let's take this moment in time to no longer look at the nation state as the only body deciding who is a resident. Amsterdam should be a welcoming and sanctuary city. Who belong to the city and who makes the city is up to us. The first public meeting we organized about a city ID card for Amsterdam was already in 2018 here in Pakhuis de Zwijger. Our idea is to push for a city ID card for all, a card that all people can carry, not only people who are undocumented, but also in the organizations. We see it as a way to show the power of the city. The power is in the people, in its citizens. But also in the organizations. In Amsterdam, we are now at the moment gathering NGOs and organizations on the topic of the city ID card. More and more organizations, Academics and self-organized collectives join us now in the call for a city ID card. We want to dream big and make sure it is a card that is not only symbolic as a means to show you belong, but also maybe in the future, the city ID card can be used as a discount card, a card that is taken serious by police and provides more safety, maybe even be used to open a bank account. Who knows? Step by step, day by day, but we think the time is now to start. Let tonight be an inspiration. In many American cities, a city ID card is provided, and we want to show these examples to our new chosen city council members, the new city board, and all citizens of Amsterdam. Thank you.
Thank you, Marian. And welcome everybody to this evening about the City ID for Amsterdam. I'm Lisa Sades from Citywide United, a European network of grassroots activists and cultural institutions by and with undocumented people in Europe. Together we work on a toolkit for more inclusive cities in Europe for everyone. And we invite you also tonight for our official launch that will happen on the 12th of May, here again in Pakhuis de Zwijger. And this will be an evening full with a program of a lot of different practices that we are collecting with our partners here all over Europe on how to overcome barriers in European cities for undocumented people. One of the sessions of that evening will also be focused on the city ID and also will be an extension of what we will discuss today, but then also more focused on other cities of Europe. Tonight's program is also part of the Week Against Racism, as you can see behind me most of the time, which is a cooperation between Pakhuis de Zwijger and Comité March 21st, and is organized annually by the Alliance Samen Tegen Racisme, Together Against Racism. And this is all in the context of the International Day Against Racism, which is here in the Netherlands on the 21st of March, and in the run-up to a national demonstration to which we also invite all of you to come with us on the 19th of March, which is being organized also by Comité March 21st. And we'll gather on the Dam at 2. And then we walk to the Dokwerker. I don't know, you cannot translate that to English. Tonight's program is organized by Amsterdam Citywide, as already mentioned by Marian, where she is part of. This is a team of undocumented and documented Amsterdammers who want to make the city fully accessible for everyone, including the undocumented. And as Marian also already mentioned in her opening statement, this evening is one of the steps in a much longer campaign, a much longer process, years of research and mobilization for a city ID for everyone in Amsterdam. I will briefly introduce our guests for tonight, and then we will get started quickly because we have only 1 hour and a lot of very interesting speakers who I will ask to answer very much to the point tonight. And for the audience, we will not have a lot of time for questions. So please keep them in mind and just come to us after we are finished, because we have contact also with our international speakers and we'll be able to answer your questions in another state. So also welcome to our international speakers. We have from San Francisco, Adrian Pan, who is Executive Director of the Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs. And we have from New York, Albert Gamera, Executive Director of the ID New York City program, and Sonia Daly. So welcome also to all of you. We'll come back to you in a while. We first have a different panel and then we'll come back to you. And we will finish tonight's program with Elisabeth Emker, our council member of the City of Amsterdam for GroenLinks. So we'll start our evening today with Najwa Sabar, who is a student at the VU and volunteer at the support group for women without a residency permit. And she has also years of experience of being undocumented in the Netherlands, but received her papers recently. And we'll also have Marianne Grace, who opened our evening with her speech. So welcome to you. And I will start with Marianne tonight, because we had, when Corona started, we talked a lot about, and I think not only in the Netherlands, but all over the world, everyone talked about structural change and used this crisis for a real systematic change in all of our cities. And I think very quickly already I realized that this is a very difficult thing. So I want to ask you first, how was it for you to be undocumented during Corona here in Amsterdam?
It's really tough. Actually, it's really tough. Our organization is calling for citizenship rights. Citizenship, because that is access to healthcare. And that was the primary response to the pandemic, is for us to be vaccinated. Because as you could understand, that the undocumented also, we don't have health insurance. We only rely on mobile clinics or some NGOs, who can, who has doctors that could check on us if we have any illnesses or we feel sick. It is so hard because first, when we heard from the news that the government has a plan to vaccinate those who are homeless or those who are refugees, but there's no mention of undocumented. Then our organization have to our organization has to write to different public health sector or which we think that could help us with this. Obtaining a QR code is another story. So everything has been linked to the Corona QR code, entrance to restaurants, cafes, libraries. Most of us are working in the domestic work sector. We have babysitters, we have house cleaners, and these also impedes us to access those areas where we take the kids that we are taking care of, but we could not get inside because we don't have a QR code. It was really a tedious process because we would just know how to obtain from the pipeline. And then later on, when we established contacts and networks, we were able to find point person within the public health sector that help us have the QR code. And then there is also, again, another ongoing debate on how to give QR code to those people who don't have visa number, those who don't have BSN. We don't fall in any of those categories because we are not identified by numbers. We are not being given the recognition that we do exist in the city, that we are migrant workers, though undocumented, but we contribute to the betterment of the society. And even without protection, even without health protection, we continue to work, and we see ourselves as essential workers because those people, there are people who could not really do anything without us because they have a career to pursue. They have jobs that they have to attend to. It's really it's not a walk in the park. It's really a tough battle out there. So people who are with us, who are documented, those good people, human rights advocates, they know our struggles. And I think policymakers should really come down to their high ivory tower so that they would know what is really going on the ground. That's it.
I think also one of the things we discussed during the times in Corona was not only you being able to access public space, but even if you would have been able to access public space, your QR code is not enough. So you still also need an identification to come with that.
Yes, when there is this thing about fraud happening somewhere in Europe, paying people who, in the story, then some establishments became strict. Like when we show our QR code, then they would ask us, do you have any identity to support? But it was like, is it the national policy now that we have to show also? Is my GVB chip card, my abonnement, which has my picture and my date of birth in there enough? Some establishments would refuse. I have to show my passport or any other Dutch issued IDs, which for me, I could, I'm a little bit lucky because I'm also a member of a union, which is a Dutch issued ID. But how about those people who don't have access to any of these documents?
So here, a city document could actually be very beneficial.
It could help them. Of course, it could really help them. And even I have some friends, I ask them, and then what do you see? What is your idea of a city ID card? You're Dutch, you're a citizen of this country, you have your pink card or whatever residence card. And then they say, I don't want to be bringing my residence card all the time with me when I am asked to prove my identity. So some people would be interested, but for an undocumented migrant who is in here already, it could be a valuable piece of plastic card that would somehow give us a safety net, like a comfort, like, okay, I'm an Amsterdamer, I live here, this is my identity, this is my picture, can you see, this is me, and my name and my birthday is in here. So somehow we would feel safer navigating through, the city, because, yeah, in case of policing, especially.
So Najwa, you actually lived through both. You both had times to not be able to identify, and now you are able to identify. Could you share a bit more of your experiences about what was the major difference? How did your life change the most?
Yeah, growing up as an undocumented teenager, it was always this extra layer that sort of seeped its way into my identity. So now, even as a documented, I sometimes catch myself still having that, sort of overthinking, simple situations. For example, after I tested positive for the coronavirus, I was sort of perplexed by how easy that just went. I could just go to the GGD and get tested, and eventually even get everything via mail and get my QR code. Of course, also thinking about the fact that had that happened a year ago, I would have fell into the same situation that Marian described, where you were sort of into this battle of trying to get a QR code just so you can be a part of society, something that was mandatory by policy, something that so many others are able to do. But once again, because you're undocumented, you're always sort of perpetually put aside.
And you also said that for you it was really hard to transfer towards realizing you actually were documented, right?
Yeah. So I carried around my student card even past the age of 20, after I finished high school, just because that was the only Dutch card that had my picture and my full name, and it also brought me a sense of safety. That and my expired OV cards and OBA-pas. So those were the only cards that I would carry around with me, because I also saw my friends, of course, around me who carried their ID. Once again, I grew up here, so I understood the mandatory fact that you also have to identify yourself on the streets if something were to happen. But on top of that, it was also a feeling of safety that if there were to happen something, that I was identifiable. And being undocumented, it was this inner battle of not being able to identify yourself, but also not having anything to identify yourself with. So, of course, as a teenager, it was something that you just had to come in terms with, that your identity equaled being unidentifiable. Yeah.
And if you think about the concept of a city ID, how would you design it to make it actually fit into this idea of a belonging?
I see the benefits that the city card ID can bring, but I also don't want it to become a form to identify undocumented people. They are a vulnerable group, and it shouldn't be like the same case with a stadspas, where you can see by color what certain income a person has. It should be something that everyone carries around with them. And for me, the best way to establish that is by speaking to undocumented people. one of my favorite quotes said by Tegen de Fokkert, a former city council member, is that we often talk about undocumented people, but rather than talk with them. So I think bringing them into the process of designing such a card, it could definitely bring so many benefits. They are a outspoken group. They're not passive. They also want change. They've been also outspoken so many times. So let's actually also include them into the discussion to make them a part of a solution. Yeah.
You mentioned the stadspas, and I just wanted to kind of catch on that also for the people who might not be familiar with the concept of a stadspas. So it's, if you translate it directly to English, it's called a city pass. And we use it in Amsterdam mostly for discount and mostly for people with a lower income or people above 65, which means that a lot of people are not that keen on using it because it also stigmatizes, because on the card you can see if someone is a lower income or if someone is a 65 pluser, because there's different discounts involved for this pass. And I've heard already a lot of people saying also that the problem with this pass is that it shows too much. It shows too much of your state, where you're coming from, and it shows to the person that you give it to, I'm either old or I have a low income.
Yeah.
Which is something you might don't want to show to everyone. No. So when we talk about the stadspas in Amsterdam, this is not the same as a city ID. And sometimes I feel there's a confusion there.
Yeah.
When we talk about something significantly bigger than what you said, just a discount pass. Marianne, I also wanted to ask for you that question. What would be for you a key thing that a city ID would need in order to create this sense of belonging, but also the security that you need to feel?
What is included in the city ID itself? Of course, my name, my birthday, my it should not include my status here, if I am undocumented or not. My address, if that would be viable, that would be good proof that I am an Amsterdammer, or I live in Amsterdam. My country of origin. So I don't want also to be identified like, you are this and you're that, because that is what we are trying to debunk in that piece of plastic that is important to most to people or group of people that are underprivileged or regarded as society as faceless. So now it's coming up to the light that okay, we have an identification card issued by the Amsterdam gemeente or whichever authority should issue that. And I am positive about it personally. This is not my stand of my organization, but for me, it would add confidence that at least I feel safer in a way that I would not be afraid when there is a policing, when the police would just suddenly randomly check the identity. Maybe they are looking for a criminal or what, and then you would be subject to a random inspection or whatever you call that, but random check, I mean. At least, I can provide something. It is not like I would see the police as an enemy here. I mean, we work in a society where everybody has a role to partake. So
I hear a part of security, a part of sense of belonging, being part of it, being part of the city, recognized in a way, and not having, all the obstacles you have to overcome by not being able to provide your name on a document.
Truly, exactly.
And actually using a travel card or a student card for what it was designed for, and not as a creative way to identify yourself.
Thank you, Najwa. You will leave us here.
Yes.
And we come back to Marianne at the end of the program again. And we're now going to... We're now going to the Zoom, where we have people from San Francisco and from New York. Thank you so much for being here tonight with us. I know there's a lot of people here in Amsterdam who have been very keen to meet the people who know so much about the New York City ID, which is a bit of a big example for us, and to meet more about the San Francisco card as well. So I'm very sure also a lot of undocumented people who are here with me in the room that you unfortunately cannot see, but I can see them, who are very eager to hear how we can reach where you actually already are. So thank you for taking that time with us. I will start with a very broad question, and that's very related to the problem that we are in right now. And that's kind of how do you build up a campaign like this? So we wanted to know about how is your, where is the origin of your campaign, and who are the people who kind of let it grow. And we'll start with New York, and then we'll go to San Francisco.
Sure. Hi there, Lisa. Hi there, guests. Hello, all of Amsterdam. I'm Sonia Daly. I'm the Executive Director of Operations at IDNYC, our nation's largest municipal ID card. So first of all, thank you very much for having myself and my colleague. This is an important conversation and we are happy to participate. And I'll just wave my IDNYC card. Hopefully you could see it as proof positive that I'm also a card holding member, if you will. Because it is the one card for all New Yorkers, all 8 million of us. And how did we get started? So back in June of 2014, our city council, which was at the time led by our council speaker, Melissa Mark Vivatero, she was doing a series of immigration related initiatives. And this is when the idea of a municipal ID card was born, in how to assist, persons who are undocumented. And then in general, how would that one card satisfy all New Yorkers? So it was written into law in June of 2014. We actually launched the program January 12th, 2015. So we just celebrated our 7th year anniversary. And it is, like I said, it's the one card unifying all New Yorkers, but in particular for our undocumented colleagues and residents, it allows them to remove themselves from the shadows of society. It allows mothers and fathers to go pick up their children from school. It allows them everyone to integrate with New York City Police Department because it is accepted by NYPD. And all of these things were thought about when we launched the program. And I can say that I've been here since prior to launch. So this is very near and dear to me. And I could speak more about it, but it allows you to rent an apartment, to open up a bank account, to liaise with libraries, to actually take a library card out. And our goal, myself and my colleague Albert, now in our 7th year, is to talk and look about how to expand the utility of the card and how to increase access to all 8 million New Yorkers. Right now, we boast 1.4 million cardholders in the city. So I think we've done a good thing.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
I just want to do one follow-up question before we go to San Francisco. Is you say you're now looking up to expand it even more? What kind of services or expansion are you thinking about?
So if I told you, I'd have to, hire you. But we are looking to just make sure that we increase our partnerships. You know what? I will punt to my colleague, Albert, if I can, and because he could speak to that. Albert, is that okay?
Of course. Hi, everyone. So we want to make sure that this card has functionality for everyone. When we launched, not to jump ahead in terms of what, we do here, but, one of the barriers we encountered was making sure that this card did not have a stigma, that it was not identified as the immigrant card. And that's something that during our research prior to launch, we noticed, and we wanted to make sure that this is what it was set out to be, which is one card for all New Yorkers. And we needed to find a way to make sure that all New Yorkers wanted to have this card. Because if you're helping all New Yorkers, you're helping all residents of this city. That includes the undocumented. And so everyone feels comfortable. Everyone feels that I'm not being identified because I have this specific card. And so that includes things like benefits. We have the ability for folks to get cultural institution memberships when they get an IDNYC card. Accessibility, making sure that this card can be received and is accepted at nearly every location we can within the 5 boroughs. Grocery discounts, everyone loves to save money. Partnership discounts in terms of outside of those cultural institutions. The big thing here was we needed to identify and make sure that this card was something that everyone wanted to have. And by having it be that way, what it does is it serves the purpose of helping everyone, including the most vulnerable within our community, undocumented individuals. And so that was something that was a big aspect of expansion. And it's something we continue to work at. We're at 1.4 million. Our next goal is 2 million, 3 million. You know, we have 8 million people we want to have this card. And it's working towards that goal every day, every year, and having that vision. It takes time to roll this out. It takes time to get buy-in. But that's something we continue to work at because it's very important.
Thank you. Just quickly to go to Adrian from San Francisco. Thank you also for being here. I think I also want to start a bit with you from the beginning of the process. So how did your campaign start in San Francisco? What kind of launched the whole initiative? And also we're very interested to hear more about what kind of initiators were there behind the concept of the cards.
Thank you so much for including San Francisco. Just a little bit about our office. The Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs was established in 2009 to coordinate policy and services for immigrants, people who speak primary languages other than English, and other vulnerable individuals. And we're one of only 20 or so in the United States today. So we oversee outreach and education to our immigrants, some city programs, language access, compliance and services, interpretation and translation, city programs, immigrant assistance and integration, citizenship, a variety of things. And we have 2 workforce development programs that involve immigrants, one for our DREAM SF program for young immigrant professionals, and then also for community safety. So our city ID card law passed in 2007. The program actually wasn't launched until 2010 because the city got sued by anti-immigrant organizations who try to stop implementation. San Francisco and the San Francisco Bay Area has a large concentration of immigrants. We don't have a lot of land. We don't have a lot of people, but we have high concentrations. So our city was built by immigrants. Over a third of the city's population today is immigrant. Nearly half speak languages other than English. And the surrounding area has millions of immigrants, with about 500,000 undocumented. Most of them come to San Francisco for services and the immigration courts. So the original concept of our city ID card was to create a gender neutral, safe, local ID card available to any resident of the city, regardless of immigration status, to serve as proof of identification and residency, and really to ensure that all of our community residents and members were not denied access to police protection, other essential city services, housing, food, and support services because they lacked government-issued ID. So the advocates were made up of coalitions of, and it was a beautiful thing, coalitions of immigrants, language access advocates, civil rights organizations, LGBTQ and transgender community leaders, homeless advocates, seniors, and faith-based, a lot of the churches, and then of course the ACLU groups push for greater protection for vulnerable immigrants and then access to police and other vital services. In San Francisco, it is an important thing now when we think about it, embedded in all of our programs and services to include, protect, and give voice to our most vulnerable immigrants. So we passed a sanctuary city law in 1989, the immigrant rights law, and established an immigrant rights commission in 1997, a language access law in 2001, and then in 2018 passed a law to allow non-citizen immigrant parents to participate in local school board elections. In 2020, a landmark law was passed to allow non-citizens to serve on boards and commissions. So this is all a long-winded way of saying that this is progressing to full and meaningful participation for all immigrants, regardless of their immigration status. And, you know, New York mentioned our sister organization in New York mentioned that challenges during the pandemic. Really, the COVID exposed many existing inequities that highlighted the challenge that our most vulnerable and undocumented immigrants face. Just language, digital, physical, and more barriers, and the inability to access timely and accurate information in language, and to access food, housing, and income assistance. So it was a real challenge for them. And I'll stop right there. Wait for your next question.
Thank you for all this information. I'm very sure they found it very useful here. There was one thing you mentioned, is that the city also got sued in the process, which delayed the implementation of the card. I was also wondering, did this court case also had a lot of influence on the public opinion about the card, or was it easy to keep public opinion and the coalition broad enough to actually keep pushing for the cards?
That is such a good question. I think the number one challenge for us at the time, and remember, this was during a time of a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment, that overcoming that misperception that this card somehow shielded undocumented immigrants and violated federal immigration law was the hardest thing to overcome, because public opinion then, you know, that misperception influenced the local population and how they perceived. But we were able to prevail in the courts. And I think by emphasizing that the card provided the same benefits to undocumented individuals, individuals that were unhoused, seniors, you know, youth, everyone, that were otherwise available to all city residents. And I think that we still, you know, our challenge today is really updating the use of the card. Now it's become kind of the fabric of the city, and it's no longer, you know, as unique or special. So you want to take a look after over 10 years of, or 12 years of implementing a card, looking at how else can it be useful. But I think that misperception that it was an undocumented card that violated federal immigration law was by far the biggest challenge.
And I was wondering the same for New York. Did you have a similar hurdle on your way towards implementing the pass, and how did you create a public opinion to support introducing the cards?
So I can share this much, that I want to say in 2016, we meaning the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, under which, you know, our program is housed or governed, I should say, we conducted a poll, a survey, if you will, of cardholders at the time. So they informed, you know, where we would take our business in the near future. So it's actually 6 years, almost 6 years since then. So we're looking to do another one, just so that we're always on the pulse of New Yorkers, and so that they have buy-in in the program. And our offices, both the Department of Social Services and the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, conducts regular businesses with local community groups, local elected officials, just so that we hear from outside stakeholders on where they think that our business should be going.
Thank you. I also see here that if you want, you can send a question to menti.com for the people here in the room and in the audience. So menti, that's how you say it, .com. And then you can write your question, and we'll also see your questions, and we might find a way to also give it to the international speakers on Zoom or to the speakers here. So that's where you can put your questions if you want. For now, as there is no other questions in Menti, because I just announced it, I will just keep on going with my questions. I also know that one of the other pressing things that people really are struggling with here in Amsterdam is also the fear of the privacy. So once you want to get a card, the struggle of registration, and what if the council government changes and there's a completely new council government, and then you have this list. And I know New York had some good ideas about this, so I want to start with New York, but I'm also very curious to hear about how San Francisco tackled this issue.
Sure, so who would you like to go first?
Yeah, okay, then we start with Adrian.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, certainly. Yeah, we have a little bit of experience with this. So from the beginning of implementation, San Francisco decided not to keep copies of any documents, vital documents that were shown to prove identification and residency. And, you know, in the beginning, it was challenging for our applicants because they would bring shoeboxes full of documents, not knowing which ones were applicable to our city ID card. But we made that decision early on not to make copies of it, but once they're validated on the spot, and they get their ID card immediately on the spot. And that was to avoid any vulnerabilities for individuals who were undocumented and did not want their status to become an issue. Also, that if we were raided by ICE, the immigration enforcement by the federal government, that we wouldn't have any copies of the documents and therefore would not be able to reveal them to any law enforcement. This was a suggestion made by community advocates that the city took very seriously, because again, our job and our intention there was not only to provide a government issued ID card, but to also protect our immigrants at the same time.
And Lisa, I can pretty much share and echo what Adrian just said. Like, as a program, it was definitely our intention to uphold the integrity of the program, maintain confidentiality of all of our cardholders. And we had a shift, actually. I think we did things just a little differently than Adrian in San Francisco, in that when we started, we were able to scan documents and retain them and have cases be adjudicated at the back of the house, so to speak. But then when the federal government changed in leadership, as we all know, in 2016, we had to adjust our entire operations. I obviously can't go into detail, but we did make a significant shift so that we brought an Albert's team, and those we will call program integrity specialists. We had to bring them to the front of our operations so that they were able to review these applications in real time, so that we would always uphold people's identification and confidentiality. So you have to be very nimble in this industry and in our business, and just adjust with politics, to be honest.
And to kind of slowly round it up as well, we are currently, so in Amsterdam, there have been council elections yesterday. That's also the timing of our event today, because we are now going to go towards the coalition negotiations, which is obviously a very good moment to try to get new ideas into the government, or a new idea. I hope they know by now. So this is a very exciting times for us. And I was wondering if you have any advice looking back at how you went through the campaigning, but also implementation of the card and kind of getting it started into your council structures. If you have any advice for us what not to do. Maybe Adrian, you want to start? I saw you were lighting up on this.
Yeah, just thinking about a couple of things. We had the political will and the community advocacy. I think we might have done a couple of things differently, in that the discounts that we negotiated with local businesses, and thinking about, the debit card feature in the card, the transit ability, all those things that we dreamed of in the beginning. I think that if we were to do it over, I would have taken a survey of our community members and really asked them what was important to them, like just hearing our speakers earlier talk about how important it is, as someone who's trying to negotiate through the city and work and just move across the city, how important that was. I think we would have taken that in, put that at the forefront of the card. And then the second thing we would have done differently, and I'm going to say this in all admiration for our sister city, New York, that they did a fantastic outreach and campaign, which I wish, and it really emphasized one New York. We could have done a one SF. You know, we've tried that many times for other things, but that would have been an important message. I think that's something we're going to look at doing now, particularly during this time where we do have some challenges with, you know, that our vulnerable populations face, that now is a good time to remind everyone that all of our immigrants, wherever you came from, whatever your status is, including if you are undocumented, that you are part of the city, you helped build this city. And I think that's the important message that we would send today.
Thank you. I saw some nodding heads here in the audience, so I think they will take your advice very, very much. Maybe New York has some advice for us as well.
Sure, Albert.
Do not underestimate the buy-in and support you have from your community. I think that we launched a program looking for ways that we can, you know, market this and try to make it successful, but it was successful probably beyond any of our belief when we launched. And that resulted in us having to quickly ramp up in the early stages of the program from, I would say, increasing our staff size probably 3 to 4 times what it was initially when we launched in a quick manner because of the amount of buy-in and support that the program had. It's a good problem to have, but it's one to be prepared for, that, you know, as you go and you know, there's a lot of folks that support this within your community. And I have no doubt you will experience that when you roll out your program. And it's something to keep in mind as you move forward and be prepared for that possibility. Sonia?
Sure. And Lisa, if I could just say this, I would also, I'm going to phrase it in not what we didn't do, but what I encourage you to do is get the buy-in from the documented population, right? The people who don't necessarily need the card. And once they support it, they will stand in solidarity with the undocumented population. That will only benefit everyone. And it will remove any stigma assigned to the card.
Marian, do you want to add something to that? Because I saw you being very
actually, good insights, the pros and cons, and how to go through the obstacles of creating a city ID card that would not stigmatize a holder, someone who has the card. So it's the information that I heard from you today is really like overwhelming information for me and for us, of course, in the community. But this is something that we are looking forward of having. And it's really a good pointer, like promote this first to those people whom you think that who don't really need it, so that they would be in solidarity for those who don't have it. It's a good point. Thank you for that.
Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to our next guest of tonight, but you'll still be here, so you can still follow us. And if there are some questions popping up, might come back to you if you're still there. But for now, welcome also to Elisabeth, our council member in the city of Amsterdam.
Yes, thank you. Hi.
How are you feeling today?
Tired? Yeah, I mean, it's been mentioned many times. We had elections yesterday, so it's been a few hours of sleep for me last night, but I think a very good result for Amsterdam, for people in Amsterdam. I think it's very clear that we're voting for social and left and progressive policies, so I have good hope.
So what do you think are the opportunities now in this new coalition negotiations?
Yeah, they start next week, so I think this is a very timely event. And the topic of today, I think, is definitely one thing that GroenLinks will be pushing for. And also something that about 3 years ago, we already drafted a proposal for a city ID in Amsterdam, based also on the example of New York, among others. And at that time, we didn't have a majority for it in the council, so it didn't make it. I was gonna say nieuwe ronde, nieuwe kansen, but yeah, it's a new time now and a new makeup of the council. So I think this is a very good opportunity. Yeah.
So as you mentioned, 3 years ago, there was already a start by the Green Party to try to get the stadspas that we mentioned earlier into a city ID. this trended somehow. But can you tell us a bit more about how, if the council or the gemeente kind of picked up this idea in the meantime?
Yeah, so I think there's different things happening. So for the last year in the council, I did, amongst others, work and income, and I was actually also writing a proposal on how we can maybe do a pilot or experiment for specifically undocumented migrant domestic workers. That also didn't make it. So I think, that's the struggle of politics. You need a majority to get things in motion. But the proposal you talked about 3 years ago, I was looking at the Stadsbus, but I think also it was mentioned earlier how the Stadsbus is also like a very specific form of ID, and what we would ideally want, which we also heard from the cities in the US, is an ID that's for everyone. So not necessarily an immigrant pass or something specifically for undocumented people, but something that's a local form of identity for everyone in Amsterdam. And one direction I think we could be exploring this, which we've already been doing in the last years, is actually through kind of a different angle. So another topic I've been working on in the last year is the digital city. So we've been doing a lot of work in Amsterdam to improve our digital rights as our society, our city, our life are more and more online and more dependent on certain big tech platforms or other companies that are not so concerned with our privacy. So we've been developing a local digital identity, and that's still in a very experimental phase. But what it tries to do is to allow us to identify ourselves by revealing less attributes than if you use your driver's license or your passport. So think of if you go buy some beer, you need to identify yourself sometimes to make sure that they know that you're above a certain age. But if you show your passport or your driver's license, you actually reveal a lot more information than just your age. Actually, they don't even need to know when your birthday is. The only thing they would need to know is that you're above 18. And so what we're working with in Amsterdam is a new identification method, which is called IRMA, which is an abbreviation for I reveal my attributes, where you only reveal those attributes that are relevant for wherever you are. Maybe it's your address in a certain context, or maybe it's not even your full address, but only your postal code. If, for example, you need to vote for your local district or whatever. So that's now in process. And I think because with our digital city agenda and plan, we really are advocating for an inclusive digital city, which also means that everyone can join whatever initiatives are being developed. So I think this could be a form of identity for all of Amsterdam. And then we should definitely also make sure that whatever is developed includes undocumented people as well. And I think Najwa was making a very good point that in this design process, make sure those people are also at the table. So you're not creating something that's excluding, but actually you can create something that is more inclusive.
So you're trying to find a balance between both finding something that works for all the documented people and that the documented people will support it, like the advice we just got from New York, but at the same time, making sure that the undocumented people can make as much use of it as normally.
Yeah, so I think the starting point is maybe more for the documented people from a privacy perspective, where we say there are so many places now in the world and online where we give away a lot of our data. And as a city, we're trying to protect more of our personal data. So that's, I think, the starting point from the last few years. But I think it would be a really good step if we can broaden it to say this also has potential to actually take the step towards a city ID for everyone.
And do you think that this digital structure can exist next to a city ID that is a physical card, or that it will actually be taken over the idea of having a card and you'll just have, as an Amsterdammer, you'll just have your app on your phone?
Yeah, I think whatever we do in our digital policies is that we always look at what are the offline options. There always should be, even if you just need to contact a gemeente for anything, there should always be a person to talk to. There should always, not everything, because so much more is online, we always need to keep an eye for people who are not maybe so digital literate, as we say. So that's, I think, in everything that we do, a point of attention. I think with this local digital ID, the direction, digital ID is for it to be an app or something on your phone, but there will always be an offline option. So that's always really important.
Marian, do you have any questions for Elizabeth?
No, I don't have right now, but maybe if everything should sink in, and then maybe I would reserve my question in the later part of this campaign.
also
Yeah,
fine.
and I think what I liked about San Francisco as well is that, if I heard it correctly, is that there was a really broad coalition of people who were advocating for this local ID. And I think if we, through this sort of digital privacy angle, you're also broadening the coalition. It's not just from a solidarity perspective with the undocumented in Amsterdam, which I would say is enough arguments. But if you broaden the coalition, you can also broaden the support for it, I hope. So if we also advocate for this from a privacy perspective, or a better way for the local government to provide services in a more privacy friendly manner, then you can also hopefully get other people on board who might be more advocates for those topics, and then you have a broader coalition.
Yeah, and that's also the reason why we, of course, are here during the week against racism and finding more partners also who are in the rest of this building today and here in the rest of the week. There are a lot of partners. There's a big campaign running. There's more grassroots organizations, but also bigger campaigns joining us on working onto this city ID. We know that the Green Party already has quite some ideas about the city pass because we made sure of that.
Yeah, and I think but I do feel there's a bit of momentum, not just because of the terrible pandemic that we've had, but I think what the pandemic did show is, for example, migrant domestic workers, like that was a very more pressing issue. I mean, it already was, but it sort of became more visible. Then we had the QR code thing, and that made it more visible how exclusive the current situation is. A report from the Ombudsman last year. So I think there's a lot of sort of moments where I'm like, I feel the momentum is here. Now we had elections with, I think, a good result. So I'm hopeful. Yeah.
We also had a question that I received here that maybe also kind of reaches to your saying that this is a momentum. So someone asked here in the room or in the audience, do you think that the current prep for Ukraine arrivals has increased space for creative solutions for registration and ID, considering that arrivals can travel visa-free and don't necessarily seek asylum?
Oh, that's a very big question. Yeah, I mean, in terms of momentum, I think there's more awareness of also the role that we as a gemeente are taking on, for example, now with the arrival of Ukrainian refugees and how important it is to register. So I think that awareness of, if you're not registered, not having access to all these services or other things. So I hope we can use that conversation to show, okay, there's also all these other people who are already in our city and have been for years who are not registered or not documented. And so maybe we can also use this to point attention to that as well. Yeah.
And also talking about Ukraine, I also think that it's good to always add here that we're talking about Ukraine arrivals, and mostly we talk about people with Ukrainian nationality, but also let's please not forget the people without Ukrainian nationality that also arrive in, for example, Germany and also the Netherlands, who actually are going to be in limbo here because of the simple fact that they only had a residency for Ukraine, and we're not automatically extending that. And I think there is a place for the city, but also for universities and for civil society to take this into account. I want to say that here too, so we don't forget about this. Yeah. We're going to slowly round up because we are at the end of the program, and I don't receive any other questions, so I think...
I have a question.
You do. I'm not sure if everyone can hear you if you answer your question from there, but you can try.
Yeah, at least, they can...
You can take my place.
Sorry, this is really important.
Come here.
Sorry for intruding.
Don't apologize for that.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. You said that. My question is, why is the Start Pass has been existing for a very long time? We cannot make a new one, but can't we update it to include undocumented people? And you also said that. I'm very nervous.
It's okay.
You also said that the policy for the city ID is to try to make sure that documented people feel that they need it. What assurance do we have that this will not be monopolized and at the end will be left out? These are my questions.
You can sit.
I can look at you while I answer. No, I think on your first point about the Stadspas, I think what was also said by Najwa in the earlier panel, that the Stadspas is mostly for discounts and for elderly people and people with a lower income. So our proposal a few years ago was to look into how can we expand that to undocumented people. And I think, from my view, but I think this also needs to be discussed with also people here in this room, but is that there's then a risk that it becomes a pass, and you add another group to it, the undocumented, while I think it would be better to find something that is just for everyone in Amsterdam. So it's more, it's a broader support. Like everyone will need it. Like one New York, like we were saying, like one Amsterdam, where everyone makes use of it. So it's less, hopefully less stigma, and also less like, oh, this is your immigrant pass with risks that come with that. So I think that's, and I'm now trying to think, oh yeah, how can we assure that whatever we develop is not excluding? Well, that's, I think, at least my job or our job, right, in politics, to make sure that we always, with this new identity method that we're developing, to make sure that all the groups are also at the table, that we include, for example, Amsterdam city rights, with how can we make sure that whatever we develop, it does not provide any extra risks, is a valid identification method for wherever you go. So I think it's having the right people at the table at all the time and all the steps in the next years of this new coalition that hopefully will be there soon. Yeah.
Thank you for giving me an answer, and I would like to add, it is very important to look to the future, but also it will be very much necessary for us, because we are experiencing it, to try to update some of the policies that are already there, because we don't know when this will be available. It might take years, but this is already there. So it's good to try to jump in from one to another to see what fits for the time. To end, people do earn low income, but we don't, for instance, refugees, undocumented people, asylum seekers, we don't earn anything at all. So these are things that are very important to us. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Mo, for sitting down. You can sit down, no worries. Because also I'm going to round up the program, because they have a next one coming up here, because there's a whole festival going on. So, because it's also Week Against Racism, so also look at the website of Pakhuis de Zwijger. Also for the people here, there's still going to be some music downstairs, so you can join the music downstairs. I don't know in which room it is, but it's downstairs. And there's also drinks at the bar, so you can keep continuing your conversation. There's also, very important, really not forget this, you can buy bags. Migration is Not a Crime, that's made by Print White, which is amongst others Mo work. And also you can buy a book from Haitam about his time arriving here in the Netherlands. I can also very much recommend that one. And we also have a radio, City Rights Radio, which is also Mo's work. So you can also listen to that. And you also have flyers on your chairs. So if this went too quick, you can also look it up there. But you can also ask me or my colleagues who are walking around here if you want to know more about all the things they do.
Yeah, listen to City Rights Radio on Spotify. And we need suggestion. And the next season, the first episode is with Marian. And Marian, it's going to be really interesting.
So thank you all for being here tonight. And thank you for San Francisco and New York for being here. And thank you for the audience. And we hope to continue the conversation.